I arrived at my auntie's house and knew something was wrong before I even stepped inside. The front door was wide open, hanging loose on its hinges like it had been kicked in without mercy. The lock was broken, the wood splintered, the doorway stripped of dignity, just like the woman who lived behind it. The moment I crossed the threshold, chaos swallowed me whole. Furniture lay overturned as if a storm had ripped through the room with deliberate cruelty. Drawers were yanked out and dumped, their contents scattered across the floor like worthless confetti. Papers, important papers, were trampled underfoot, creased, torn, disrespected. The house didn't look robbed. It looked violated. Then I saw her. My auntie was sitting on the floor, right in the middle of the mess, unmoving. Her back was slightly hunched, her shoulders stiff, her face frozen in a blank expression that scared me more than tears ever could. Shock had settled into her bones. In her lap, she held an empty metal box, her fingers curled tightly around its edges like she was afraid it might disappear too. That box had always been sacred to her. That box held her life. "They took everything," she whispered. Her voice was hollow, barely audible, like the words were scraping their way out of her chest. I knelt beside her, my heart pounding, my eyes darting around the room as if the attackers might still be hiding in the corners. "Who did this?" I asked, though something inside me already knew. She swallowed hard before answering. "Your uncle's sons," she said, "my own nephews." The words landed heavy. These were the same men she had allowed to live in her second property, rent-free, out of kindness, out of family loyalty. The same men who touched her feet during festivals and called her Aunty with fake respect. She told me they came early that morning, not alone. 2 other men were with them, strangers with cold eyes and impatient voices. They stood in her living room and told her she owed them the property, said it belonged to them now, said she had no right to it. When she protested, they started tearing the house apart. They ripped open drawers, flipped cushions, pulled files from cupboards, shouting, accusing, threatening. They demanded the property papers, circling her like hunters cornering wounded prey. She said one of them leaned close enough that she could smell his breath and told her that if she didn't cooperate, things would get ugly. She was terrified. So she gave them the papers, every original document, the deed, the sale papers, the tax records, everything she had carefully protected for years, handed over just to make them leave her alive. As she spoke, my eyes fell to her wrist. Dark bruises were already blooming beneath her skin, the shape of fingers clearly visible. I reached for her hand and she flinched before she could stop herself. "One of them grabbed me," she said quietly, like she was confessing a shame that didn't belong to her. My chest tightened. I looked toward the windows, curtains half drawn. I knew the neighbors. I knew they had seen something. She confirmed it without me asking. "They watched," she said, "from their windows. No one came. No one said anything." Fear had silenced them, or maybe indifference. She told me this hadn't started today. For months, those same nephews had been pressuring her, calling her again and again, visiting unannounced, telling her to do the right thing and sign the property over to them. Every time she refused, that rent was her only steady income, her independence, her security. Now it was gone. Without those papers, she had nothing to prove the property was hers. No legal shield, no evidence, just her word against theirs. And they were already poisoning that too. "They're telling everyone I'm confused," she said, her voice trembling for the first time, "that I don't remember what I own, that I'm losing my mind." My phone rang before I could respond. It was my cousin. I answered, my hand shaking with restrained fury. He laughed. "Your auntie finally learned her place," he said, amusement dripping from every word. The line went dead, but the echo of his laughter stayed lodged in my ears. I stood up so fast the room spun. Rage surged through me, hot and blinding. I was ready to storm out, ready to confront them, ready to burn their lies to the ground. Her hand shot out and clutched my arm. "Don't," she begged. Her grip was tight despite her shaking. Fear choked her words. "They'll hurt you too." I looked down at her, this woman who had survived decades of quiet sacrifice, who had been generous to the very people who destroyed her, and I understood something with terrifying clarity. This wasn't just theft. This was calculated, planned. A coordinated attack designed to strip a woman of her power, her security, her voice, because they thought she was alone, because they thought she was weak, because they believed no one would fight back. My mind slipped backward, dragged by rage and memory, to the beginning of my auntie's story, the part everyone conveniently forgets. I remembered her wedding photos, the shy smile on her face, the quiet hope in her eyes. And then I remembered how quickly it all ended. She was widowed young, far too young, left standing alone with no children, no shield, no one to speak for her in a family that only listened to men. Her husband had left her 2 properties. One was the house she lived in, the only place where she felt safe. The other was a small commercial building. Nothing flashy, nothing powerful enough to impress greedy minds, but enough to matter. That commercial property became her lifeline. The modest rent paid her bills, bought her groceries, gave her something priceless in that family: independence. At first, the relatives came wearing smiles. They offered help, advice, support. But I could see it now for what it really was: an attempt to slide their hands into what wasn't theirs. Every suggestion carried strings. Every favor came with expectations. My uncle, her brother-in-law, was the boldest. I still remember the day he said it out loud, as if it were common sense. He told her she should let the boys manage everything. He said it gently, smiling, but his words cut deep. "You're just a woman alone," he told her. "Why take stress you don't understand?" She smiled back, polite, calm, and she refused. Instead, she hired her own property manager. She learned the paperwork. She handled the finances herself. She signed her own checks, read every document, asked questions no one expected her to ask. That refusal, that single act of quiet defiance, changed how they looked at her forever. Years later, his sons, my cousins, moved into part of her commercial space. They promised they would pay rent regularly. They touched her feet. They called her kind. They swore they would never disrespect her generosity. The rent came on time at first, then it came late. Then it came with excuses. Then it stopped altogether. And still, she didn't evict them. Because family, she said. Because blood. Because she didn't have the heart to throw them out. At family gatherings, the respect vanished. I remember the laughter, the sideways glances, the jokes disguised as concern. They openly mocked her business decisions, shaking their heads like she was a foolish child playing adult games. Behind her back, they called her that stubborn widow. They resented her refusal to bow, her refusal to hand over control, her refusal to disappear quietly into dependence. I remembered sitting with her one afternoon as she opened her cupboard and showed me her files. Every document neatly labeled, every paper placed with care. Her eyes shone with pride as she explained what each one meant. She ran her fingers over the folders like they were armor. "These papers are my freedom, Beta," she told me softly. "Without them, I'm nothing." She had sacrificed so much to protect those properties. She paid every tax on time. She renewed every license, every registration, every legal document. Nothing was delayed. Nothing was careless. Everything was pristine because she knew the world was waiting for her to make one mistake. And she knew that because she'd already fought once. After her husband died, his family tried to contest the will. They said she didn't deserve everything. They said a widow shouldn't keep property meant for blood heirs. They dragged her to court, confident she would break. She didn't. For 2 years, she fought them, alone, quiet, determined, and she won. The court established clear ownership. The law stood with her. That victory burned itself into the memories of those who lost. It turned relatives into enemies. It taught them patience. After that, the exclusions became subtle. Holiday invitations stopped arriving. Conversations ended when she entered rooms. Her success, small, steady, undeniable, became something they couldn't forgive. She once mentioned almost casually that she had kept copies of everything in a bank locker. A precaution, she said. I didn't know if she still did. I didn't know if those copies were safe. I didn't know if they even remembered she was smart enough to plan ahead. Standing there now, surrounded by the wreckage of her life, it hit me with brutal clarity. This attack didn't start this morning. It started decades ago. It was born from resentment, fed by greed, and justified by a belief that a woman like her, alone, widowed, unyielding, should never have been allowed to win in the first place. The very next day, they made their move official. My cousins changed the locks on the commercial property, bold and unapologetic, telling anyone who asked that it was theirs now. Steel shutters came down like a final verdict. New locks gleamed in the sunlight, mocking years of my auntie's sacrifice. By afternoon, her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Tenants called her, confused, voices overlapping with panic. Strangers were showing up at their shops, demanding rent. New men, confident men, men who spoke like owners. My auntie tried to explain, tried to calm them, but her words collapsed halfway through each sentence. Without the papers, her voice sounded weak even to her own ears. I swear it's mine, she kept saying, the crack in her voice betraying her helplessness. Please, just give me some time. That evening, my uncle came to her house. He didn't come alone with concern. He came armed. He placed a document on the table like a weapon, smoothing it out with deliberate care. He said she had signed it years ago, an agreement. According to those neatly typed lies, she had gifted the commercial property to his sons in exchange for care and support, as if love could be itemized, as if loyalty came with receipts. The signature was hers, but it wasn't. Anyone who truly knew her could see it was forged. The slant was wrong. The pressure was wrong. The confidence of her hand was missing. She pointed it out, her fingers shaking. He leaned closer and lowered his voice. Take this to court, he warned. See what happens if you make trouble. I confronted my cousins at the property the next morning. They were standing there like kings surveying conquered land. When I demanded answers, they didn't deny anything. They laughed. What are you going to do? One of them said, smirking. She has no proof. We have all the papers. I took a step closer, and one of them shoved me back hard enough to make my vision blur. Stay out of family business, he warned, his smile gone, his eyes cold. That night, the phone calls started. Anonymous voices rang my auntie's phone after midnight. Low, threatening, male. They told her to accept reality, told her to stop fighting, told her things would get worse if she didn't cooperate. She sat awake in the dark, clutching the phone, jumping at every sound. Soon, the family joined in. Relatives called her not to help, but to pressure. They said she should let it go, that she was being difficult, that she was embarrassing everyone by making noise. My uncle's wife went further, whispering to anyone who would listen that my auntie was mentally unstable, imagining things, accusing innocent people. The property manager quit without warning. He wouldn't even meet us. Later, he sent a message saying he'd been threatened and didn't want trouble. Just like that, another layer of protection disappeared. The rent stopped completely. No money came in, not a single payment. Her only income vanished overnight. I watched her open her jewelry box one morning, hands trembling as she picked out pieces she'd worn for decades. Bangles, a chain her husband had given her. She sold them quietly, one by one, just to pay for groceries and electricity. Her savings drained fast. I contacted a lawyer, desperation tight in my chest. He listened carefully, then sighed. Without the original documents, he said, the case would be extremely difficult. Possible, maybe, but brutal. Long, uncertain. The stress began to destroy her. She stopped eating, stopped sleeping. Her eyes sank into her face. Her hands shook even when she was sitting still. One night, I found her curled up in the dark, sobbing into her pillow, trying not to make a sound. "I should have just given them everything years ago," she whispered. "At least then they would have left me in peace." Then came the final confirmation of how deep their planning went. The bank called. They told us her locker had been accessed months ago and emptied. Someone had used a forged power of attorney. Another lie, another layer, another betrayal executed with patience and precision. My cousins didn't even bother hiding anymore. They started posting on social media, smiling in front of the property, writing captions about finally getting what's ours, pride dripping from every word. And in that moment, watching my auntie crumble while they celebrated, I understood something with terrifying clarity. They thought the story was over. They thought she was broken. They thought this was the end. I was digging through old photo albums at my auntie's house, my hands shaking with desperation, flipping through memories instead of documents, smiling faces, festivals, moments frozen in time. I wasn't looking for nostalgia. I was hunting for proof, anything that could save her. That's when it slipped out from between two photographs, a faded receipt. The paper was yellowed, the ink nearly worn away, but the words were still there. A legal documentation service, a date from 15 years ago. My breath caught when I read the line that mattered most, certified copy services. Below it was a case number, handwritten, almost forgotten. I didn't tell her yet. I picked up my phone and called the number on the receipt, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear the ringing. When someone finally answered, I read out the case number, my voice tight with hope I didn't dare trust. The clerk paused, then said something that made my knees weaken. They kept permanent archives. Every document they had ever certified was stored, preserved, logged. He typed for a moment, then confirmed it. Complete certified copies of my auntie's property documents were still on file. Deeds, sale records, tax payments, every page time-stamped, authenticated, legally admissible in court. I requested the full archive immediately. When the package arrived and I laid the documents out in front of my auntie, she stared at them like they weren't real. Then her face crumpled. She broke down, sobbing, clutching the papers to her chest as if they might vanish again. Hope flooded back into her eyes, fragile but alive. We weren't powerless anymore. No. I contacted a property rights lawyer who specialized in elder abuse and fraud. She went through everything carefully, page by page, her expression sharpening with every document. "This is airtight," she said. "Theft, forgery, extortion." She explained that forcing someone to surrender documents under threat wasn't just unethical, it was criminal. What they had done wasn't clever, it was illegal. We filed a police report detailing the break-in, the stolen documents, the threats. The lawyer requested security footage from nearby houses, and one family finally stepped forward. They provided video from that morning. I watched it with my fists clenched. It showed my cousins and their associates forcing their way inside. It showed them surrounding my auntie. It showed the intimidation, the control, the fear, the truth, captured frame by frame. As the lawyer dug deeper, more cracks appeared. We uncovered records showing my uncle had a history of property disputes with other relatives. Patterns, complaints, settlements swept under silence. Then a former tenant of the commercial property contacted me. His voice was hesitant, guilty. He said my cousins had tried this scheme before. He sent me text messages where they openly discussed getting rid of the old woman and taking the property once and for all. I felt sick reading their words. My auntie's doctor provided medical reports documenting her bruises, her injuries, and the severe stress-related decline in her health. Proof that this wasn't just financial abuse, it was physical and psychological harm. The lawyer moved fast. She filed a civil case for full property recovery. She filed a criminal complaint for extortion, forgery, and intimidation. Every document, every message, every video, every medical record stacked into a case they couldn't laugh away. And the most satisfying part of all, my uncle's family didn't know. They didn't know we had the certified copies. They didn't know the police report existed. They didn't know the case had already been filed. They were still celebrating, still posting, still convinced they had won. They had no idea the ground beneath them was already cracking. The summons were served in the middle of a family gathering. Laughter was still hanging in the air when uniformed officers walked in and called my uncle's name, then his son's. Conversations froze, smiles collapsed, papers were handed over, official seals unmistakable. I watched their faces drain of color as reality finally reached them. They knew. We weren't begging anymore. We were fighting back. My uncle's eyes locked onto mine, burning with disbelief and fury. His sons stood stiff, reading the documents again and again, like the words might change if they stared long enough. That night, my phone rang. It was my uncle. His voice was thick with rage, no trace of family left in it. He told me to withdraw the case. He told me we were making a mistake. Then his tone dropped into something darker. "If you don't stop this," he hissed, "I'll destroy your auntie. I swear it." I didn't argue. I didn't interrupt. I recorded everything. Every threat, every word, another nail in his coffin. The first hearing arrived faster than they expected. We walked into the courtroom carrying files they believed didn't exist. The certified documents were placed before the judge. Deeds, sale records, tax histories, clean, authenticated, undeniable. Across the room, my cousin's lawyer looked genuinely confused. He kept flipping through his notes, whispering urgently to them. They had sworn to him there was no documentation. Their lies were finally catching up. The judge didn't hesitate. An immediate injunction was issued. My cousins were barred from collecting rent, barred from altering the property, barred from touching anything they had stolen. Just like that, their control evaporated. My auntie sat beside me, silent but steady. Her back was straight, her hands no longer shook. She watched them squirm as their confidence cracked and their smirks disappeared. Their so-called gift agreement was brought forward next. A handwriting expert examined it carefully, then spoke clearly for the court to hear. The signature was forged. Police reports followed. Investigators revealed that the bank locker had been accessed using fake identification and forged authorization papers used by my cousin himself. Not coincidence, not confusion, a deliberate crime. Criminal charges were filed on the spot: forgery, theft, breaking, and entering. Then the security footage played. The courtroom went quiet as the screen showed my cousins forcing their way into my auntie's house. Their voices, their aggression, the moment fear froze her in place. When they tried to claim they were just visiting, the video destroyed the lie before it could breathe. Former tenants testified next. One by one, they spoke about harassment, threats, intimidation, how rent was demanded aggressively, how they were warned not to speak to my auntie. Our lawyer laid out the financial records, documented rent payments that never reached her, bank trails showing money diverted straight into my cousin's accounts. Over 2 years of illegal collection. The judge's face hardened with every detail. The full scope of the fraud unfolded, and there was nowhere left to hide. My uncle tried to speak, his voice trembling now. Desperate, his own lawyer stopped him mid-sentence, placing a hand on his arm. He knew it was over. The court ordered the immediate return of all original documents. Full access to the property was restored to my auntie. My cousins were ordered to repay every dollar they had stolen, plus damages. And that wasn't the end. Separate criminal proceedings for forgery and extortion were officially set in motion. As we walked out of the courtroom, my auntie didn't cry this time. She lifted her head, breathing deeply, the weight finally shifting off her shoulders. For the first time in years, justice wasn't just promised, it was delivered. The original property papers were returned under court supervision, placed carefully into my auntie's hands like something sacred being restored. Her fingers trembled as she held them, eyes fixed on the documents she once believed were lost forever. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. She just pressed them to her chest and breathed, as if reminding herself she was still standing. The locks were changed again, this time with police officers watching every turn of the key. No shouting, no threats, just authority, just order. My cousins stood at a distance, silent, stripped of the confidence they once flaunted. A restraining order barred them from entering the property. The space they had claimed as theirs was officially, unmistakably taken back. So, the tenants were notified immediately. Letters went out explaining the legal resolution, stamped and sealed, rent payments resumed properly, flowing back to the rightful owner. When my auntie received her first rent check after months of nothing, her knees buckled. She cried holding it, not because of the money, but because it meant survival, because it meant she had not been erased. The criminal case followed its course. My cousins received suspended sentences and heavy fines, their names etched into public records they could never scrub clean. My uncle's reputation collapsed under the weight of truth. As details spread through the extended family, doors quietly closed on him. Conversation stopped mid-sentence when he entered rooms. Those who once defended him now avoided him, ashamed of their complicity. Some came to my auntie with apologies, eyes lowered, voices uncertain. She accepted them politely, with distance. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. She hired a new property manager, this time with strict contracts, legal oversight, and zero room for manipulation. Every term was documented, every responsibility defined. Control was hers again, and this time it was protected. The recovered back rent paid her medical bills in full. Her depleted savings were replenished, slowly but steadily. The fear that had hollowed her out began to loosen its grip. She joined a support group for elderly victims of financial abuse, sitting in circles with others who carried similar wounds. Soon, she began speaking. She shared her story, not with bitterness, but with clarity, helping others recognize the warning signs she once ignored. Her voice, once silenced, now carried purpose. The neighbor who had provided the security footage became a friend, stopping by regularly, checking in without being asked. As part of the settlement, my uncle's sons were required to issue a written public apology. It was printed in the local community newsletter, their words stiff and forced, their shame on display for everyone to read. No edits, no excuses. My auntie framed the court order and hung it in her living room, not as decoration, but as proof that she fought back, proof that she won. She updated her will, building ironclad legal protections around her remaining years, leaving nothing to chance. A local newspaper ran a story on elder financial abuse, featuring her case anonymously. The details were unmistakable. The message was clear. One night, as we sat together in quiet, she looked at me and spoke softly. "I finally sleep through the night," she said, "without fear." And in that moment, I knew the revenge wasn't loud. It was complete. I think about how silence became my auntie's most powerful weapon. Not the silence of fear, not the silence forced on her by threats and humiliation, but the silence of restraint. The kind that lets predators believe they've already won. The kind that buys time. The kind that listens while others expose themselves. They assumed a quiet widow would never fight back. They believed her calm meant weakness. They thought dignity meant surrender. They were wrong. I'm speaking to you directly now because what happened to her wasn't rare. It was calculated. Predators don't always look for money. They look for vulnerability. They target the ones who don't shout, who don't boast, who don't advertise their strength. They mistake gentleness for permission. What saved my auntie wasn't force. It was documentation. It was the legal system doing what it's meant to do when someone finally knows how to use it. Papers don't tremble, records don't forget, time-stamped truth doesn't care who lies louder. Too many elders facing this kind of abuse don't know their rights. They don't know their options. They're told it's family matter, that courts are shameful, that silence keeps peace, and so they suffer quietly, believing help isn't meant for them. My auntie was terrified, but she trusted the process anyway. That courage matters. Walking into a police station when your hands shake matters. Sitting in a courtroom when the people who hurt you are staring back matters. And we need to say this out loud. Some of the worst financial abuse comes from family. It hides behind familiar faces, shared meals, and the word love. It wears tradition like camouflage. So check on your elderly relatives, ask questions, listen closely. If something feels off, it probably is. Help them organize their documents, make copies, secure them, make sure someone trustworthy knows where everything is. Legal aid exists. Elder abuse resources exist. In most communities, help is closer than you think, but only if someone reaches for it. This story is a lesson about preparation, about documentation, about knowing when silence is strategy, and when it's time to fight. My auntie's meticulous record-keeping from years ago saved her life as she knew it. Every receipt, every renewal, every careful file became a shield when she needed it most. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes justice files paperwork. Thank you for listening to our story of quiet resilience and legal victory. If you know resources that help prevent elder abuse, share them in the comments. Tag someone who helped you through a legal or financial crisis. Let them know their support mattered. Remember this, vulnerability isn't weakness. Seeking help is strength. I leave you with this image, my auntie standing in her own living room, holding her property papers safe in her own home. Subscribe for more stories where the silent win through the strategy. And ask yourself one last question. What documents are you keeping safe, and who knows where they are?